What should you do about the new US News and World Report rankings? So much has changed. Should you care? Does it affect anything? Does it affect your admissions or your application cycle? What if you've already decided on a school? What should you do now? For those of you who are new, my name is Sydney Montgomery, and I'm the founder of S. Montgomery Admissions Consulting, a brand underneath the Barrier Breakers 501c3 nonprofit that specializes in working with first-generation and minority law school applicants. And today, we are talking all about the U.S. News and World Report rankings. If you have been following the news, if you've been on Reddit, which you shouldn't be, if you've been listening to any other podcasts, shout out to Status Check with Spivey, you have probably heard that there are new U.S. News and World Report rankings. But what exactly should you do with all this information, and what's changed? Especially if you're a first generation or Black or minority applicant, how does this affect your application cycle? So first, let's talk about what actually changed. The US News and World Report rankings have gone through a lot of turmoil in the last few months. It was announced several months ago that schools started dropping out of the rankings. First, it was Harvard, then Yale, and then a number of schools pulled out of the rankings, 62 schools in total just about. And let's be clear about what pulling out of the rankings actually means. Every year, US News and World Report asks law schools to give a certain amount of information to them so that they can put it into their methodology. They ask law schools to fill out a survey, basically, with all sorts of data points. And then they take those data points and some publicly available data points and their own analysis, and they have their own special sauce methodology, and they make their rankings every year. Well, this year, several law schools said they would not be participating in the US News and World Report rankings. What this means is they would not be giving information to US News and World Report. It doesn't mean that they can't be ranked, and you'll see those schools are still ranked. But it just means that US News wasn't able to use information that only the law schools had in creating their methodology. Now, why did so many schools decide that they weren't going to participate in this ranking system this year? Because law schools were tired of having their concerns not heard. Their concerns that the ranking system unfairly prizes schools that have policies that actually end up hurting first-gen and minority students. Policies that don't award giving of need-based aid or financial aid to students that really need it, that they unfairly prioritize things like LSAT and GPA, and that the way that certain metrics about debt was calculated really did hurt and disadvantage more groups than others. And so the schools that were really trying to do more in terms of DEI might not have been rewarded as much in the rankings as they should have been. Now, there's a long debate and a much longer video about how diversity does and does not factor into the US News rankings. That is a video for another day. But there are a long list of concerns about the ways that expenditure on students was calculated and other metrics that, again, law schools felt like did not align with the values and what they prioritized and what they wanted to be known for as a school. And more importantly, what they felt that students should be looking for in the legal profession, right? They wanted to send a message that what US News was prioritizing is actually not what should be prioritized when we're thinking about what makes the quote-unquote best law school or an ideal law school, what we should be shooting for. There are a lot of great articles on this. We will link them in the comments below. But I just wanted you to have some background information on what was really going on. So, of course, there are a lot of schools that probably pulled out for less altruist reasons. I mean, everything in admissions and in higher ed is also always a business. So there are definitely some schools that maybe just didn't like where they were ranked, and so it was easier to pull out, or they didn't like the way that they were treated in the rankings. And once a certain subset of top schools pulls out, it becomes very easy for other schools to decide, you know what, we never liked the rankings anyways. So much of what goes in behind the scenes in law schools sometimes is dependent on those rankings. Hiring decisions, policies and admissions offices, school priorities can sometimes be done with an eye towards getting higher in the rankings rankings or changing our ranking spot, right? And sometimes those policies can really hurt students. And honestly, most people in admissions did not get into admissions just to play a numbers game. They got into admissions because they like helping people and they want to be part of students' journey and they want to make a meaningful impact in legal education. And so sometimes an over-reliance or over-focus on rankings really detracts from that mission. And so those are just some of the contexts for what was happening behind the scenes. But what actually changed with the rankings? And like I said, I'm going to link some things in the show notes for you in the comments and caption below. If you haven't already gone to Spivey Consulting, they are really great at data. Mike Spivey is a great friend, and the way that he does data is really impressive. And so they have entire in-depth analysis on the exact metrics and what changed and why and how this affects things, all the percentages. You can see the full list of rankings there. So what I am going to do, however, is I'm going to go through, and I'm not going to read all of them because there's way too many, but I am going to give you a sense of maybe the first top 30, 35 schools, just in case you haven't seen them. And then we're going to talk about what in the methodology has changed. We're going to talk about what has actually changed in terms of rankings. And then most importantly, we're going to talk about, does it even matter? So the thing to note is that there were a lot of changes with this year's ranking. An unprecedented 68 law schools saw an increase or decrease of more than 10 places in the rankings. 31 schools saw an increase or decrease of 20 places in the rankings, which is pretty wild. I mean, sometimes schools will go like up 3 points, down 3 points, but 20 points is pretty dramatic. And we'll see that some schools had even more than that. If we were to look at the rankings as they currently stand, they are as follows. Read without comments. Stanford, Yale, University of Chicago, University of Pennsylvania, Harvard, NYU, Duke, Columbia, UVA, Berkeley, Northwestern, Michigan, Cornell, UCLA. Those are the top 14. It's important to note that Harvard, NYU, and Duke are tied for 5th. Columbia and UVA are tied for 8th. Berkeley, Northwestern, and Michigan are tied for 10th. Starting with Georgetown at number 15, University of Southern California, University of Minnesota, Vanderbilt, UT Austin. All 4 of those schools under Georgetown, all 5 of those schools under Georgetown are tied for 16. University of Georgia, WashU St. Louis, and then the following schools are tied for 22. University of Florida, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Wake Forest, Ohio State, Brigham Young University. Notre Dame and Boston University are tied for 27. Boston College and Fordham and Texas A&M are tied for 29. Arizona State, University of Utah, and George Mason University are tied for 32. George Washington University, Emory University, and University of Iowa, and University of California, Irvine are all tied for 35. University of Kansas, Washington and Lee, and University of Wisconsin are all tied for 40. University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, Villanova are both tied for 43. Pepperdine, Indiana University, SMU, William & Mary are all tied for 45. Baylor and University of Washington are tied for 49. And University of Maryland, University of Oklahoma, University of Tennessee, Knoxville are tied for 51. I will end at 60 just so that you know. University of Arizona is tied for 54 with Temple University, University of Colorado Boulder, Florida State, Wayne State, and Seton Hall are all tied for 56. And then the following schools are all tied for 60. Loyola Marymount University, University of California College of the Law San Francisco, formerly UC Hastings, University of California Davis, University of Kentucky, St. John's University, University of South Carolina, University of Houston Law Center, University of Richmond, and Florida International University, which went up 38 points. So you can read the full list of rankings. Like I said, the link will be below. But it's important to note that a number of schools saw significant jumps. We see schools like Duquesne University, which went up 40 points. We see schools that have University of Hawaii went down 44 points. There are a number of schools. It's also important to note that more schools are ranked. So previously, after 147, it was kind of unranked, and now it's ranked all the way through 180. So there's a lot of changes that happened. Some schools, like I said, really went up. Some schools really fell down the rankings. But does this mean that they actually changed as a school? Not really. And that's what's most important here to remember. So there's a couple of things that changed in the methodology. First is that US News really had to rely heavily on publicly available data in their own assessments because so many schools did not actually provide that information that they would have in those surveys. Student outcomes, which used to be 26%, went up to 58%. Employment, 10 months outside of graduation, went up from 14% to 33%, which I personally think shows you, like, when we look at the rankings, a lot of the state schools changed, public schools changed, and some of them really like rose significantly in the rankings. And you might be like a little curious about that. And again, we're going to talk about why I think that's maybe not such a bad thing, but also doesn't say anything has changed about the school. But if you look at some schools like University of Iowa or Roger Williams, and I don't know where they are in the rankings right now, so I'm not talking about where they are, but there are some schools, maybe not University of Iowa. Let's look at Roger Williams University, which I love. Love it as a school. It is the only school in Rhode Island. Like, it's the only law school in that state, which means that, like, you probably should be pretty good at getting a job in Rhode Island, right? There are some state schools that, yeah, okay, are you gonna work at a big law firm in New York? No, probably not as easily right after graduation. But can you get a job? Yeah, you can. You can get a great job in your state, and that counts for something. And I think that's something that we don't often talk about, but the ability for you to go to a professional school, maybe pay in-state tuition, and get a job in said state cannot be overlooked. It's not as glamorous or shiny as some of the other rhetoric that we want to talk about with law school, but having a stable and affordable law school career, and then if you want to stay in that state, right, and especially, you know, not everyone wants to work 60, 80, 100-hour weeks at big law. Some people, there are lots of different ways to be a lawyer, and if you are thinking about doing any kind of law, like personal injury law, family law, medical malpractice, employment law, I mean, there's so many different areas of law, government law, that like could have a more stable 9 to 5, 10 to 7, but a more stable situation, and you want to stay in a particular state, maybe you're already married, maybe you've got kids already, or you are able to go for free and you're able to get a great scholarship and you're well connected, or maybe you have goals of joining the judiciary in that state. There are some really great state public options that I think hopefully we will start to talk about a little bit more. Some other things that changed with this rankings: first time bar passage rate used to be 3% of the methodology, and now it is 18% of the methodology. I personally think that's a good thing, because you're going to law school, you should hopefully be able to pass the bar. And if you cannot pass the bar, then you cannot do the thing that you hopefully went to law school to do. Now, lots of people don't practice after they graduate from law school, and that's totally fine. But if your goal for going to law school was to practice law, then you need to be able to pass the bar. It's just like that. There was less of an emphasis on median LSAT and median undergraduate GPA. Median LSAT went from 11.25% of the methodology to 5%. Median undergraduate GPA went from 8.75 to 4%. And then, you know, there were some other things like peer assessment scores went down. There were some changes in the student to faculty ratio that started being weighted a little bit more, and then average expenditure per student actually went away, which was kind of good. They also got rid of average graduates with debt and graduate with student loans. Those are metrics that tended to hurt schools that took in a larger percent of lower income, first gen, and minority students. And so there's a lot of different things that have changed with this methodology, but I think the real question and the ultimate question is, what does this matter to you? How should this affect your thinking about what schools to apply to or what schools to decide to go to? Some of you are on wait lists, and maybe the school that was on your wait list just dropped 20 points and you're like, whoa, what do I do? The same. You do exactly the same thing you were going to do before the rankings came out. I think that it's something to remind yourself that rankings are only important because we say they're important. And insofar as rankings have any importance, I mean, I understand that we live in a flawed society. We live in an elitist society, and the law is an elitist institution. I'm not going to tell you otherwise. I could absolutely sit here and say, go to law school wherever you want. You'll have an equal chance of getting any kind of job you want from any kind of law school. But that would be a lie. I would be lying to you, and especially if you're a person of color, if you're first gen, if you're a woman, if you're the intersection of those, if you're a woman of color like I was. It's just not true. It's not true that you will have the same exact employment opportunities no matter where you go. Now, hear me, I am not saying that your employment opportunities are dictated by where you go, but there are certain advantages in some ways to going to some schools. That being said, there are lots of advantages to making a smart financial decision as well, and that's important. So let's talk first about the employment opportunities. Employment opportunities are so often dictated by perceived prestige and not actual prestige, and certainly not actual rankings. Like, Georgetown Law School students are not less employable because they are ranked 15 than when they were ranked 14. That would be the most ludicrous thing I'd ever heard of. And anyone that tries to tell you that would be full of it. Like, it is still a fantastic, fantastic school, right? With fantastic employment opportunities. So that 1 point, whatever, in rankings doesn't matter. Now, if you're saying, but Sydney, what about the school that dropped 10 points in rankings? These rankings change every single year. Every year. And employers' perceptions do not change that fast. So if you think about it, it probably takes 5 or 10 years maybe for a school's reputation and prestige and brand to either really grow or really diminish because of some scandal or situationship. It takes a long time. And then once that maybe happens in the legal academia community, it takes even longer for the corporate world and for employment to actually be like, oh, this school's not as prestigious as it was, right? Like, it just takes a very long time. And so you have to understand that there are so many different things that come into play. So, like, let's use my alma mater, for example. Harvard Law School is now ranked number 5. Okay. Harvard Law School has not lost any prestige. It just hasn't. It will still open doors. If you asked a random person, even a random attorney on the street, what ranking do you think Harvard Law School is? Like, how many of them are going to say 5, right? Because people don't actually know the rankings. I'm in this and I still had to read out the rankings. Like, if you told me, Sydney, list all the rankings in order from 1 to 30, I would not be able to do that. Because normal people who do not sit and memorize rankings, they don't know these rankings off the top of their head. I don't remember what the exact order of 1 through 30 was last year either, or the year after that, or what it will be next year, right? And neither do employers. So they're not looking at your resume and then pulling up US News and like, oh, well, it fell 10 points. So I was gonna hire her, but not anymore. That's just not what they're doing. Right. And so it's really important to remember that the employers really only care about perceived prestige and brand name and also what's on your resume. So thinking about clinical opportunities, whether you were on a journal, who you know, networking, getting a warm introduction. The legal community is incredibly small. And so that kind of goes to the point that I'm going to make in a bit. When you're looking at schools, it is way more important that you look at schools that are going to help you network and that are going to give you practical experiences and that are going to give you robust career support and those warm introductions and those connections, because that is how you will get a job more than just what number your school is ranked on US News. That is not really going to be the thing that's going to get you a job. Again, I've expressed that schools haven't really changed in terms of quality just because these rankings have come out. New rankings can come out next year that completely upends all of this, and schools do not change that quickly. So there are some metrics that you should be looking at that probably haven't changed that quickly. That's bar passage rate, that's employment rate, right? You are going to law school for a reason. You hopefully want a job, especially if you're a first-gen or minority student. You want to make sure that you are using law school to increase your upward mobility, to allow you to make the change that you want to make in the world, and to actually leave a legacy and create generational wealth for yourself. And there are so many people that go to law school who end up in worse financial situations because they did not think about these things. They just wanted to go to law school. They took out way more debt than maybe what that median salary would allow for. And they ended up in a worse financial situation. They took out so much debt, but maybe they're only making $55,000 a year because, let's be real, we don't talk about it, but a lot of lawyers do not make a lot of money. But like, if you have $200,000 a debt and you only make $55,000 a year, you're going to be in debt for a long time. Honestly, that might not have been worth it from a financial standpoint. So you want to make sure, or worst case, right, if you're not able to get any legal job, and then it's like you have the same job that you could have had without the $200,000 in debt. And I am not practicing as an attorney, so I'm not saying you have to have a legal job, but what I am saying is that you have to make smart financial decisions, and you need to still use, like, my Harvard Law degree has opened doors and has put me in a better financial position and career position than I would have if I hadn't gone to Harvard Law School. And I was really careful and thinking about the debt and how I was going to pay it off and what debt programs there were and what financial aid was available to me and all those things. Now, I have to say that there are so many reasons why you might find yourself in a questionable debt situation, and it's really hard to get financial guidance and advice, and that's what we're going to try to do here in future videos. But it's really important that you are thinking about the financial implications of going to law school, and you're thinking about the investment that you're making, right? And so I don't care if this school went up 40 points or 50 points or 100 points. Has their bar passage rate changed? Has their employment score changed? Because if only 30% of their students are graduating or passing the bar, and only 40% of their students can get a job, I'm making these numbers up, then I don't care that they went up 100 points in the rankings. Again, I'm making these numbers up, because what that just tells me is that there's some sort of methodology situation that made it so, but also you probably are more than 50% of the students don't pass the bar, and more than 50% of the students don't have a job when they graduate. So, like, I don't know that that's a good financial investment unless you're telling me it's, like, completely free. And even then, I would still want to know what your other options are. So, like, those are the things that matter. You want to find a school, like I said, that's going to support you with your career, some networking opportunities, good clinical opportunities, warm introductions, career services and support, bar passage rate, employability, employment score, and the median salary, right? And then you also want a school that's going to support you academically. If you're someone that has any learning differences or have accommodation needs, is this going to be a school where you will academically succeed? Because I don't care how high the bar passage rate is, how high the employment score is, how high it's ranked, how high the median salary is. If you end up in the bottom 10% of your class, you're going to struggle. You have to go to a school where you are going to thrive academically. And then you also need to go to a school that has a good community for you. So are you a person of color? Are there affinity groups for you? Are you a mom or a dad? Is there support for students with children or spousal support? Are you a veteran? Do you have any kind of physical or cognitive impairment or disability that needs taken care of? These are things that you want to make sure that you have support and you have community around. These are the things that matter. Way more than the rankings. Yes, the rankings changed a bunch, and it can be quite exciting, perhaps. But I urge you to think like a lawyer, to ask yourself why, to do your own research, and to understand that these rankings are so fluid and honestly not something that I would make a major life decision based on. There are other numbers, other metrics, other more important factors that don't change so wildly year after year that are important when thinking about your law school application cycle, where you go, and even where you stay if you're a student that's thinking about transferring. So hopefully this was helpful. Please let me know, what questions do you have? Please make sure that you rate and review, like and subscribe, share this with a friend. It was amazing being here with you. As a reminder, Barrier Breakers is a 501c3 organization. What that means is that we run on donations and grants. We do have sliding scale pricing for all of our students, especially students that are first gen and BIPOC, but we do rely on support of our listeners and our community members to support us. So if you want to support a student, or if you want to continue to support our work, you can always check the link below at barrier-breakers.org/donors. We would love to have your support. And if you are a law school student or applicant or even a legal professional, or someone who is, make sure that you are registered to come to our second annual Break Into Law Conference, July 8th and 9th. We will have a full law school fair featuring schools like Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Michigan, among others. We have over 30 law schools registered. And then we also have a law firm fair. So if you are in law school and trying to figure out, okay, where am I about to work? I need a summer associateship for next year. I want to meet some firms before OCI. Make sure that you register for this conference. Every single person who registers will be eligible to win a scholarship up to $3,000. So make sure that you're registered. Tell a friend. You can register at bit.ly/breakintolaw. We would love to have you. That's all, guys, and I will talk to you soon.